Okay. You want me to wait till 1?
Nope.
2:01? Or you want me to go now?
Oh, no, go ahead. Wait till 2:01.
Okay. It is 2. I'm sure it's
2:01.
There we go. All right. People are admitted.
Welcome, everybody. Holy cow. This is always a great feeling just to see all the smiling faces, or maybe concerned faces. I'm not sure which ones, but it's just good to see everybody. I see Lois, I see Christian, I see Kim. Just holy cow. All right, there's too many of you. We First of all, we want to thank everybody for tuning in on a Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. Central. Yeah, of course, if you're out east, it's 3 p.m. This program was set up to start on Monday evening at 7, this last Monday, but Indivisible and 5051 and all the various groups had a huge meeting that they put right at the same time. So Ed was very kind to allow us to move his to a future date, which is today. And just seeing all of you on here was great. So we do have a live YouTube video going. So if you do not want your face on the video, please turn your video off. But we do love to see your faces, particularly when we're talking to you after questions. All right. So Ed, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few seconds here. Go ahead.
Well, thanks. I thank everybody for coming. This is quite a time, you know. I had planned to do something on Citizens United this month. A couple of folks in our organization wanted to have an update, and frankly, I learned some new things. So I want to, and I was preparing that presentation. I want to show it to you sometime, maybe next month or maybe the month after that. But the trouble is that things move so fast. I mean, I saw a posting by Heather Cox Richardson talking about what Trump is doing overseas. And that made me think, heck, we can't talk about Citizens United. We have to talk about what's going on. And while I'm putting that together, then all this ICE stuff hits the fan. And I feel like even this one is out of date now. So things are happening so fast that it's hard for all of us to keep up to date on it. Well, I'm going to talk to you tonight, this afternoon, about what's going on overseas with relationship with our allies. We will touch on what's happening domestically as well, but it's a very challenging time for all of us, I know, and I'm happy to have all of you here so we can talk about it together. Bill, you want to say a few words about NWSOFA before we begin?
As always, I do. Yes. It'll take me just a few seconds to bring this up, but with any kind of luck,
Here we go.
okay. So this program is being brought to you today by NWSOFA, which stands for Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. We're in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, commonly referred to as the land beyond O'Hare. We are an indivisible chapter. So tonight we have Ed Spire, who is one of our co-leads for Restore Our Democracy. And he is going to be presenting the crisis in U.S. democracy and the new Might Makes a Right world. So thank you for being here. As I said, we're part of Indivisible. Indivisible is growing at 4 to 5 chapters a day across the U.S. Every one of those little dots is the U.S. chapter, over 2,700 now. The reason that we present these programs is to help you understand the facts, to sharpen your arguments when you're communicating to your audience or to your friends or other folks. So NWSOFA is organized on the twin snowflake principle. On the left-hand side is our communications snowflake. And on our right-hand side are all of our issue teams. The ones in the turquoise on the outside are the 10 issue teams that we had at January of last year. We added 9 more. That's the inner circles here. And just about every month, every issue team has a program that is presented, usually on Zoom, sometimes in person. It's a lot. And my job is basically the chief cat herder, but we have 30 all volunteer leads that work with both our communications and with all of the various issue teams. 2 new things that we've been very proud of over the last few months is our new link tree. It's an ability, if you scan that QR code or you go to the NWSOFA link tree, you can go to all of our various communication areas, whether it's whether it's our website, whether it's our Substack, whether it's a sign-up forms to join the organization, whether it's our Blue Sky, YouTube, and on and on and on. As I said in the very beginning, we are recording this with our live YouTube. When you go up on our NWSOFA.org website, you just click on the tab that says YouTube channel, and you click through that once, and you're presented with hundreds of videos. What you want to do is click the one that says, the tab that says live, and the one that is being recorded now is this one here. It's about a 35-second delay from what we're doing here now. Today, we'll take questions and answers, as Ed always does, after the presentation. When you put your question in chat, start it out all in caps with question, and then type your question. Debbie will be harvesting those questions and will consolidate those and ask Ed those questions later. So let's get started with the presentation tonight by Ed Spire. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I gotta figure out how to share the screen again now. Here we go. There it is. Well, thank you all for being here. It's just amazing. There's 170 people from across the nation that took time in their Saturday afternoon to come together and talk about these things. So it just shows how important this stuff is to our nation and our population. So I call this crisis of democracy, and I'm talking about America's alliances. Let me make it clear. We're going to talk a lot about foreign policy, and my viewpoint is that Trump is doing things in foreign policy that are damaging to our country, that are damaging to our allies. And if this is a democracy and the people don't want him to do this, we ought to find a way to stop him. And we haven't been able to do that. And just to me, that means our democracy is not working. If our democracy worked well, the checks and balances in our structure would work and would stop him from doing the stuff we don't want him to do. But so I consider the fact that he's able to do all this stuff as clear evidence that our democracy is in trouble. We will touch on domestic things as well, but we're going to talk about where we are right now and how we can see from what happened in Greenland that there's a lot to learn from what happened there. We can see that he's pushing a pattern of breaking points, and that there's some serious danger in his unlimited exercise of power. We'll talk about what a nation have done during and after World War II to try and create an orderly world, and how that he's taking that stuff apart. We'll touch on what happened at Davos. We'll talk about the cost to us and to the world of what he's doing. We'll talk about what's going on in our country as well, and what we can do, and be reassured that we can do something. So look, this is amazing. We have a sitting president claiming control over NATO territory, NATO of one of our allies' territories, and he's threatening to dismantle 75 years of international stability. He's abandoning the alliances we built, where we are build alliances on shared democratic values. And he has contempt for the rule of law and constitutional limits. And we can see these things being reported in the press, in the New York Times, in a lengthy speech at the World Economic Forum at Davos. He alternately praised and threatened our allies. While he pledged not to use force to seize Greenland, that was some measure of relief, but that wasn't much comfort when that was undercut by his mocking tone, speech that underlined European leaders' worries about the health of NATO and their relationships with us. The remarks he produced in that setting, it stretched for over an hour. He lashed out at NATO in front of fellow NATO members and our military alliance, and he lobbed criticism of all the leaders of several nations. Uh, uh, Somali immigrants, United States, wind power, and more. He just goes on and on and on about stuff that's just completely off topic from what he's there to talk about. And it looks really embarrassing for our country. Um, we see the BBC talking about how he's shaking the world order more than any president since that World War II. You know, our history is littered with controversial American invasions, occupations, covert operations. We toppled rulers and regimes, but in the past century, no American president has threatened to seize the land of a longtime ally and rule it against their people's will. Come now. No U.S. leader has so brutally broken political norms, threatened long-standing alliances, which have underpinned the world order. This is what you're seeing in the news in England. So this is what Europe is seeing that we're doing. There's little doubt that old rules are being broken with impunity, and it's not just us seeing this. Obviously, our allies are seeing this as well, and he's just abandoning those allies. He wants a country where America stands alone. We need allies to stay safe. But Trump's narcissistic foreign policy will never admit that. He thinks that we can run the world, or at least run our hemisphere by ourselves. Um, his foreign policy views are based on what he wants or what he thinks might benefit him. And rather than true isolationism, he treats security guarantees as a protection racket rather than a mutual interest. You know, we'll help you as long as you help us. And this vision of solitary strength that he thinks we have, it appeals to those who see alliances as burdens, foreign entanglements as traps, international cooperation as weakness. But that thinking fundamentally misunderstands how power works in the modern world. It ignores the hard experience of our history. We've been down through this many, many times. We've come to a way to help the world and our nation and protect our interests, and he's throwing all that away. Um, he's just got contempt for the rule of law, for constitutional limits. You know, Denmark and Greenland have said that sovereignty over their land, over any part of their land, is not negotiable, period. Um, there was a point where he was saying, well, maybe I don't have to own the whole island. Maybe I can just own parts of it where we put military bases down. And they said, no, you're not going to own any part of Greenland. They insisted after the Davos meeting that nothing about their sovereignty of any part of their territory is non-negotiable. Um, but they said they reached a deal. What really happened there is that Trump kind of backed down and agreed that he saw he couldn't get what he wants. He couldn't bully it his way through. He understood that we wouldn't let him use the military to do this. So he made a deal, which isn't really much of a deal. It's not much more deal than we already had in the first place. Um, this has really been a test of our democracy. And what that whole process revealed was that he just does total dismissal of diplomatic norms and allied sovereignty, and he even tried to use economic coercion to force his acquiescence to his laws, to his desires, and is just complete disregard for NATO unity and international law. Once again, you can see these things very clearly in press releases, in press reports. If you look around for reasonable, reputable sources, you see that, well, he suggested that Denmark's claim to Greenland is doubtful. Uh, his Stephen Miller, his chief of staff, uh, he doesn't want to. It's suggested that the niceties of international law shouldn't be followed. The issue should be, Miller says, the issue should be determined according to the power relations among nations and their security needs. What he's saying is that he thinks that might makes right in these kinds of cases. But Denmark's claim is unimpeachable. Even in the 1951 defense agreement between us and Denmark, we unambiguously recognize the sovereignty of the Kingdom of Denmark over Greenland. So this is not a debate. He's just making stuff up here when he says he thinks that there's some doubt about Denmark's control over Greenland. And he went on to threaten tariffs. He said, I want Europe to support my takeover of Greenland, and I want European countries to support it. And if they won't support it, I'm going to increase tariffs on them. It's going to be a 10% tariff now. It's going to be boosted up to a 25% tariff in a couple of months. And oh, he vowed to implement these tariffs on EU members: Denmark, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, Britain, Norway. Um, this is blackmail. This is kind of like saying, nice restaurant you got here. Too bad. Hope you don't have a fire someday. Um, he's really acting like a mob boss when he does this kind of stuff. And clearly, somebody might say he should have the power to manage the economy, and if he needs to use tariffs to manage the economy, okay. I mean, I don't think that's right, but some people think it is. But when he says, I'm going to use tariffs not to manage our economy, but I'm going to use tariffs to push people in the world to doing what I think they should do, that's not what tariffs are for. That's There's nothing constitutional, there's nothing legal about him doing that. And of course, they all pushed back very hard, and he backed down. He said, okay, well, I got some kind of deal with Greenland, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use the military. I'm not going to use tariffs. But he tried. And he really didn't care about NATO unity and international law. Um, uh, if he pushed through what he wanted to do with Greenland, it would have been the end of NATO. It really would have been. Um, Europe will have to, and these people see that they have to engage and deter us. The Europeans really pushed hard to defend NATO and push him back because if we annex Greenland, and violate Danish sovereignty and Greenland's right of self-determination, that would be a crass breach of international law and would essentially end the NATO alliance. How can you have a NATO alliance if one country inside the alliance is attacking another country inside the alliance? Um, so the people of the governments of Europe really pushed back very hardly, saying, uh, we can't allow NATO to get taken apart because that's how we defend ourselves against forces in the world that are looking to make trouble for us, basically the Russians. And he's really pushing this pattern of trying to find breaking points where he can get his way. Military intervention. He doesn't feel he needs congressional authorization. He threatens international institutions which have helped control uh, the modern world, so we don't have world wars, huge wars like we had before the UN was founded. Um, it doesn't care about human rights, doesn't care about refugee protection, um, it doesn't care about democratic constraints, unilateral power exercised by him. Once again, you see all these things in news reports. Uh, his bombing of Venezuela, his kidnapping of their president, is entirely unconstitutional. Uh, the power to decide when and where and against the U.S. goes to war belongs to Congress, not to him. That's a core part of our system of checks and balances, and for good reason. Uh, There were no threats to U.S. troops, no enemy attack on our country from Venezuela. Um, his power to use defensive military force without waiting for a congressional vote uh, is okay, but there was no need for a defensive strike. What he did was not defensive; it was offensive. It was unilaterally striking out in another country, and that is permissible only if Congress authorizes the action. Congress authorized the actions in Afghanistan and Iraq, but no, Congress didn't authorize us to take action against Venezuela. Um, the Congress and the president have pushed and pulled over what constitutes defensive or offensive force. But this was different. This was attack on a sovereign country and seizing its leader, followed by a vow for us to run the country and exploit its oil. Uh, Undertaking these kind of hostilities with the risk cost of war should not depend on the whims of a single man. And that's just not how this country is supposed to be run. Um, and to take these actions without congressional authorization, even the New York City Bar Association, a bunch of these are people who understand the law. Uh, the Bar Association, in the strongest possible terms, condemns what Trump is doing. It's blatantly illegal for him to order the use of U.S. military forces against Venezuela and to seize its president, to assert control of its oil reserves, to run the economy until a new leader satisfactory to Trump is selected. And the Bar Association says this unprovoked use of military force violates our Constitution, violates the War Powers Act of '73, and we we cannot just accept these actions by our president. The president's actions brazenly violate the UN Charter. And we have a binding treaty with the U.S. that was ratified, which prohibits the threat of or use of military force against any nation except in self-defense. And the Bar Association of New York is calling on Congress. Congress must act to halt the president's violation of U.S. and international law in Venezuela. Uh, this is something we have to take seriously, and we have to get our Congress into a shape where they will act. He is just threatening all kinds of international frameworks that we've had in place for a long time. Um, he ordered authorizing sanctions on the International Criminal Court and its chief prosecutor. That's intended to stop the ICC from undertaking their mandate, and their mandate is to try and enforce international law. When you stop trying to enforce international law, you see that's a court of last resort. Um, the sanctioned prosecutor that he's attacking, he's handling crimes against Mohammed Ibrahim al-Masih, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Yoav Gallant. He's looking at the court interfering with what he wants to do in the Middle East. But when you turn off the court just because you don't like what they're doing in the Middle East, then uh, you have no recourse for the Palestinians, but you also harm all other ICC investigations, not just those opposed by the U.S. government in the Middle East. They negatively impact the interests of all victims who look to the court for justice. Um, and when it's conducting its investigations, including investigations that we support them in taking action in Ukraine, in Uganda, in Darfur. But when he pulls the rug out from underneath the ICC and UN frameworks because he doesn't like their actions in the Middle East, he's he's opposing and damaging other of our national interests as well. Uh, his withdrawal from these vital organizations, it's a continuation of assault on a multilateral rules-based system. That's a system that we helped to create after World War II. His unilateral exit, that exit empowers our adversaries. It robs the U.S. of its voice within these institutions. It limits our ability to assure that these institutions will align with our interests. And you know, he thinks he's doing this, advancing our priorities. Well, it's advancing his, but it's not advancing the priorities of our nation. By withdrawing from these international organizations, um, many of these organizations affect support for the livelihoods of everyday Americans and U.S. companies, including UN bodies that help to ensure a clean, safe environment, fair global labor and trade standards, investment in the future of renewable energy. He's throwing all that stuff away. We built a world order where we all could work together for these goals that we all support, and he's just throwing away the ability for us to cooperate with the international community. And these decisions endanger the lives of Americans, undermining organizations that combat threats from foreign terrorists, our global adversaries. And he's ceding influence to foreign competition, diminishing our leadership in the world and diminishing our leadership in designing the rules that govern the global digital economy, for example. That's raising costs for U.S. businesses. Just another example about how Trump's version of America, America first, is in practice America alone. And he might think America alone can is better than America in tandem with our allies, but he's wrong. And he's just allowing erosion of human rights, refugee protection. Um, he's openly trying to suppress First Amendment rights, silence opposition through deliberate unconstitutional intimidation tactics. The first day in office, he began to issue orders aimed at dismantling immigrants' rights and due process. He was striking simultaneously at birthright citizenship, asylum, and any semblance of fairness in the deportation process. They censored academic discussions about race and gender. They've abandoned civil rights enforcement. Heck, you know, we used to have a large part of the DOJ working on civil rights enforcement, but now everybody in the DOJ is working on uh, throwing colored people out of our country, and nobody is looking at civil rights enforcement or any other area where the federal government ought to be looking at crime. Um, and they're abandoning civil rights enforcement on behalf of the historically marginalized groups. And they're using funding cuts. They're sweeping purges of federal grants to impose their ideological agenda. On his very first day back in office, he launched a ruthless agenda attacking transgender people as well. So it's just human rights, refugee protection, they mean nothing to him. Um, this month, for the first time, we refused to participate in the United Nations Universal Periodic Review, a process to examine human rights record of each member state. And we used to be part of that and lead that and try and show that we're trying to do the right thing and try and focus on countries that aren't trying to do the right thing and shine a light on countries that aren't. Well, the fact that we failed to show up this year reflects the fact that the Trump administration is unwilling or unable to defend their abhorrent human rights record here in this country. So they're smart enough to know that they better not show up where we talk about human rights because their record stinks on human rights. um, you know, back in 1980, we launched a U.S. refugee admissions program that standardized how we brought refugees into the country, how we screened them, admit them, and resettle the refugees. Well, his crackdown on immigration, he signed an executive order that indefinitely suspends this program, and he paused several other programs granting temporary protection to displaced individuals. In fact, we have brought people into this country from areas that are under turmoil, like Haiti, where we know if we send these people back, they're going to get killed. So we brought a lot of people in the country from areas in the world that are in turmoil, and he's ending all those programs. He wants to send all those people back, even though a lot of those people are are working and frankly rejuvenizing some of our rural areas where people have been leaving. There's not enough people to run meatpacking plants. Well, these immigrants have come in and are running the meatpacking plants for us, and 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 they had temporary protection because we knew they came from places where they were going to get killed. And he's just ending all those programs and sending all those people back. He's lowering the refugee admission ceiling. He's setting a cap for this year to 7,500, which is a historic low. And it's stark contrast to the 125,000 caps we had under Biden. The administration's admission policy is set to prioritize white Afrikaners allegedly facing discrimination and violence in South Africa. So he really doesn't want this to be a nation of immigrants, which is absolutely the opposite of what our tradition has always been. And he's acting without concern about our democracy. Um, he uses executive orders. He issued 228 executive orders last year. That volume and pace of executive orders far exceeds any other president in our contemporary history. 1 year into his second term, uh, we see a governing style that relies on unilateral action. Even at a time when the president's party controls both chambers of Congress, he could get Congress to authorize him to do stuff, but he doesn't even want to try. He just says, "I'm just going to do it, and I don't care what Congress thinks." And the Republican leadership in Congress says, "Fine, you go ahead. We're not going to try and stop you." Trump's use of executive orders has overstepped the limits of presidential authority. He's trying to force states and other parties to, well, he is forcing states and other parties to push back against him. And it has resulted in many courts invalidating most of his most prominent initiatives, like his birthright citizens initiative, his desire to take over how elections are run. The courts have firmly blocked all those things. But we see the danger. We see the danger unlimited in his desire to have unlimited power. This really shows it. When reporters asked Trump about what kind of limits there should be on his power, he answered, "My own morality," as if he has any. "My own morality, my own mind. That's the only thing that can stop me." Just think about that statement from our president. And that's the core threat. He wants unconstrained executive power, answerable only to his own personal judgment, not to law, not to Congress, not to institutions, not to our Constitution. And it's interesting that we see that he does that. I'll get to that. We see that his own judgment can cause him to stop doing some things, even though our laws and our Congress and our Constitution should stop him. The dangers in unlimited power. You know, democratic republics are not designed to rely on his personal restraint and allowing him to do whatever he wants. That makes our government capricious and sometimes dangerous. You know, people can't access constitutional rights when their right to constitutional rights hinges on his whim. Uh, the risk is less a factor of who occupies the Oval Office and more that the system learns to accept executive overreach, whoever the president is. You know, if we don't fix this, the next president, even if it's one of ours, could very easily ignore Congress. And when we thin out a republic like that, a damaged republic, it doesn't repair itself. There's got to be intervention. We have to have some deliberate action. Congress must reclaim its power. Courts must insist on enforcing the limits. And executive authority has to be held accountable by both Congress and the courts and by us. And without our doing that work, what he's doing to our government is sets a baseline for tomorrow, leaving our republic kind of intact in structure, but very brittle in essence. I mean, if we don't stop him, he sets a precedent that whoever comes after him, and you know, it might be us next time. Time after that, it might be one of them, and we just can't have the president alone deciding how this country runs. So that makes this a historical moment. And as I mentioned, reading Heather Cox Richardson is what reminded me of how important it is that we talk about this and why I decided to not talk about Citizens United and talk about this with you today. We are no longer facing the possibility of authoritarianism. We are living in it now. You can look at Minneapolis and see that. The question is no longer where the norms will be broken. They're being broken. The question is whether we will defend what remains. The post-World War II order is unraveling. Generations fought to build a world based on rule of law, not force, democratic values, human rights, multilateral cooperation, and institutional stability. And that's all being taken apart. We can see that he doesn't want to go by rule of law. He wants to go by force. And it's been called out quite loudly. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said the quiet part out loud at the World Economic Forum. What many call a global rules-based order was either collapsing or has collapsed already. And in the last few weeks, the United States, whose military and financial heft underpinned much of that order, has invaded Greenland, has threatened to invade European territory of Greenland, invaded Venezuela, threatened to invade Greenland, promised to levy tariffs on any Western allies that might oppose it. Trump has made it clear the old way of doing things doesn't interest him. The post-World War II rules-based order that we helped build, that we led, the order concepts, those concepts of sovereignty and of resolving disputes through negotiations, they don't matter to Trump. They don't matter. And it's not just they don't matter to Trump. The rest of our allies look at the U.S. and say these things don't matter to our nation anymore, which is nonsense because we know all these things still mattered to you and me and the 200 people around this call. He's completely throwing over values of human rights. He has announced that he will withdraw from 66 United Nations and international organizations, including major forums for cooperation on climate change, peace, democracy. Trump said that the decision comes after review of which organizations, conventions, and treaties are contrary to the interests of the United States, which is nonsense. Cooperation on climate change, cooperation on peace and democracy are contrary to the interests of the United States. What? He must be smoking some really good stuff because these are things that we do want to pursue. We have pursued these things for decades. And we're going to continue to pursue them, but we got to get him out of the way. And we got to stop letting him decide what he thinks is in the interest of the United States when we know he's wrong. His national security strategy, he just completely revised what we intend to do with our military. He says the days of the United States propping up the entire world order like Atlas are over. So old neoliberal rules-based architecture is falling apart. Power is diffusing. Much of the world is searching for new multilateral arrangements to act as a buffer against major powers, three major predatory powers. And they think we're one of those predatory powers now under Trump. US, Russia, and China. The rest of the world is trying to figure out how to defend themselves against Russia and China and us. He's got 3 years left in his term. But he's already the most consequential, transformative president since FDR. Some could call him a world historical figure. He's altering the course of history and likely not for the better. And we're letting him do it. The United States appears to many to now be a predatory rogue actor, a major destabilizing force, with Trump diminishing the value of alliances and multilateralism that have been the hallmark of U.S. foreign policy since 1945. For God's sakes. And it really all came to everybody's attention here, and most importantly overseas in the Davos meeting, where he had just attacked everybody. He said about Canada, Canada lives because of the U.S. Canada should be grateful to the U.S. How insulting. To Denmark, he mocked their World War II defeat as proof they can't defend Greenland, whereas NATO can defend Greenland when we work together with all of our allies. To France, he says, what the hell happened to Macron? To Ukraine, he called Zelensky foolish for not surrendering to Putin. He says he's saying these things in front of the world leaders and the allies. They all wake up. They see this pattern, and the Canadian Prime Minister's response spoke for all of them. This is not a transition. This is a rupture. If we're not here sitting at this table, we're on Trump's menu. And Canada is now seeking strategic partnerships with China, India, Southeast Asia, Latin America, moving away from reliance on international relationships and economic relationships with us. And all the other nations of the Western Hemisphere are going to be doing the same thing because they can't trust us anymore. And there's tremendous cost to us and cost to the world from what he's doing. If he follows through on all these tariffs and keeps them around, um, there's 108 billion impact targeting our sales of agricultural uh, and most of the agricultural commodities that we won't be selling come from red states. There's 105 trillion U.S. EU trade relationship at risk, and that's larger than U.S.-China trade. I mean, the EU is really our biggest trading partner, and we're just slapping them in the face. And we are vulnerable. Um, Japan, China, and many other countries, they hold our debt. If they reduce their holdings, our borrowing costs are going to spike. Our interest rates are going to spike. Our dollar is going to be devalued. Our retirement funds are going to be affected, yours and mine. And uh, International Banking Organization Fitch projects that tariffs will significantly slow growth in the economic growth in the U.S. Right now. These are impacts to our country and to the world that he's causing, and he's empowering other autocrats. Um, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they work together, and their power rises as we withdraw from the world. Um, we mirror tactics that the U.S. condemns from China. We set precedent for Putin on Ukraine. When we think we can just take over some other country, we can just invade another country and kidnap their leader. That just says to China, go right ahead. And we don't want China to invade Taiwan. Taiwan builds a lots of semiconductors that are critical to us for many reasons, not just for AI. And what we're doing just emboldens Beijing to not just use military force against Taiwan, but to use coercive trade issues against Taiwan as well. So as we exit the world stage, we lose leverage. Our allies flee from us, and other autocrats coordinate more closely against us. Stepping back, we used to be a global power. And he wants us not to be a global power anymore. He wants us to be a regional power and just let Russia be the regional power in Europe and China be the regional power in Asia. This is not in our best interest. And I've been talking mostly about international, but we see how democracy is under siege here at home as well. Limits on presidential power are ignored. Congressional authority is being stripped. Rule of law is weaponized against perceived enemies. Truth, accountability, eroded. Checks and balances under siege. It's right there in the news every day for all of us to see. For 2 months, Trump has unleashed immigration officers on the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul in a siege of increasing cruelty and violence. These thugs are dragging citizens from their homes, deploying 5-year-olds as bait, arresting demonstrators, using pepper spray on protesters like bug repellent at a barbecue. They've shot 3 people, including just plain executions of Rene Good and Alex Preddy. You all have been seeing this for your very eyes. Um, all these actions violate our Constitution. They violate the First Amendment protection for our right to speak freely, to assemble, to protest. They violate the Fourth Amendment, protects our individuals from unreasonable search and seizure. It would be impossible to list every way federal officials have violated the Fourth Amendment in Minnesota. They're violating the Fifth Amendment, protects against depriving us of life, liberty, and property without due process. There's been no due process in anything they're doing. Um, They violate the 10th Amendment, which stipulates that the powers not delegated to the United States uh, are reserved for the state. So the state should have some control of their own government. Essentially, the 10th Amendment is to guarantee the state sovereignty in areas not given to the federal government, and that's being completely ignored by the Trump administration. They're violating the 14th Amendment that guarantees that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any without due process. Once again, speaking of due process, as that text says, this was aimed at the states in the aftermath of the Civil War. Supreme Court has applied much of that protection to the federal government. The people who drafted the 14th Amendment were trying to eradicate state-sponsored violence against Black people, police invading their homes, stealing their property, hunting them down for violent treatment, and even massacre. Well, gee, those have shocking parallels to what's happening to people of color in Minnesota today. So, and Congress is useless. Congress is doing nothing. Their authority seems to have been stripped completely. We have Republicans who are leading Congress are just letting Trump and his administration stretch the power of the executive branch into areas that are normally reserved for the Congress. His aides have pulled back funds appropriated by lawmakers. The Congress constitutionally controls federal purse strings, but the administration doesn't care what Congress says we should spend money on or not. The president has implemented sweeping foreign tariffs using existing sources of authority in new, very expansive ways. And his administration has remade or demolished whole federal departments that Congress created. Our other checks on presidential power, such as inspectors general and agency appointees who were previously insulated from White House influence, they've been sidelined, they've been fired. So the kinds of checks and balances built into our system that are supposed to be implemented by Congress are just completely missing now. And the rule of law, the Department of Justice, is being weaponized against Trump's perceived enemies. Uh, Most of us agree that weaponization of DOJ to target, excuse me, I'm sorry. Americans see what's happening to Trump. They see that he's corrupted the Department of Justice, turning it into a personal revenge machine. 55% of Americans, including 3 in 10 Republicans, recognize that the president is abusing law enforcement to prosecute his enemies. It's clear this isn't a partisan issue anymore. It's a threat to the rule of law, and that transcends party lines. The pattern is undeniable. He's attacking James Comey, Letitia James, John Bolton, and now Jerome Powell, head of the Fed. All Trump's critics charged after he publicly demanded their prosecution. DOJ has been co-opted by him to serve his interests, not the public's interests. And he's really clearly using the rule of law against his enemies. He's using what he's doing, using Justice Department for presidential retribution, is far beyond what Nixon was doing in Watergate. The idea that the White House should not interfere with the DOJ is widely accepted. It's a constitutional norm. Since Nixon, major reforms such as contract policy, contract memos, which require all communications between the White House and the DOJ, they have to be well documented. They have to be transparent. They become deeply rooted in the public's understanding of how just and transparent the federal government is. The concept of separation between the president and the attorney general has remained central to our shared understanding of prosecutorial independence. And that's all been swept away. The DOJ now just does whatever Trump wants it to do instead of what they decide by themselves. Trump may declare himself the nation's chief law enforcement officer, but Congress and the courts have always recognized that the president's executive power does not empower him to interfere with the DOJ. The DOJ's investigations or prosecutorial decision making. You know, when Renee Good was shot, the DOJ immediately said, "We're going to investigate the shooter and find out whether this was a violation of Renee's civil rights." And then that's what the DOJ said. And then the leaders that Trump put in charge of the DOJ came in and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to investigate Renee Good. We're not going to investigate what the DOJ normally would investigate. So we can see very clearly that this administration is not interested in letting the DOJ do what the DOJ ought to do, but is going to make the DOJ do what Trump wants it to do: investigate the victim, don't investigate the shooter. And his truth and accountability are just systematically eroded. Um, he he entered his first week in office by firing all the inspector generals, 17 different inspector agencies, effective immediately, meaning that nobody was watching out for independent. These people were the independent offices within agencies designed to protect taxpayer money, root out corruption, fraud, waste, and mismanagement. And he just got rid of all those guys right away because he didn't want them interfering with what he wanted to do with government. He revived Schedule F, and that tends to politicize the nonpartisan workforce. The role of independent watchdogs in our federal agencies is critical if we want to prevent corruption, but they're all gone. So that means corruption is right there. Preventing corruption, calling out ethical violations was a key part of the role of the IGs, and that's why he's getting rid of them, because he doesn't want them around watching what he's doing. He's 1 year in. He's really repressing the free press. He's on track to join the ranks of the world's worst press freedom in this country. It's easy for Trump's individual attacks on our press freedom to kind of just wash away into the constant churn of the news cycle, but you put them all together, and one conclusion is unavoidable. The president is waging an all-out war on the press freedom and journalism. In fact, we just heard today that they've arrested Don Lemon, who was a journalist covering a protest. But, he's a black journalist, so of course they're going to arrest him because they don't want journalists covering protests. Any journalist or outlet that displeases him is a target. And it's not just empty threats. He's going to use the DOJ. He's going to use licensing. He's going to use every power the federal government has to stop the press from covering things he doesn't want to see them cover. They've gone out of their way to punish, investigate, damage, defund, and castigate independent news media. He's running a war on freedom of the press. And that's got dramatic consequences for us, for our democracy, because if we don't know what's going on, we can't understand that we have to stop it. His attacks on the press have to stop. And my goodness, in January 27th, his top immigration officials repeatedly made statements after the violent encounters involving federal agents, including the 2 fatal shootings of U.S. citizens in Minneapolis this month. And their statements were later contradicted by evidence. So to say is they're lying to us. Trump officials quickly pointed to 2 recently shot dead people, Renee Good, Alex Freddie. The Trump administration says they are aggressors and that their shootings were justified. But we can see with our own eyes in the many videos that and other evidence that emerged that contrasted sharply with these accounts. So we see that he's lying to us about these things. And that fuels questions about the credibility of all the statements coming from the administration. Personally, I don't think I can trust a word they say after we hear them say that the ICE agents are the victims here, and the people we shot are domestic terrorists. What nonsense! And they say that out loud, and they expect us to believe it, and we know it's not true. And that makes it pretty clear they're not serious about investigating these incidents or others. They've recently said the FBI is going to do some investigations. Well, we'll see what happens with that. Just because they say something's going to happen, I don't believe it's going to happen. So all of our checks and balances are under siege. He's dismantling institutional constraints. The Inspector General has been fired. Federal Reserve independence is threatened. Judicial independence is under attack. He's targeting law firms and he's trying to stop efforts to impeach judges. He's out to remove every institutional brake on executive power. And what can we do? Well, we can stay informed. We can listen to reputable news sources. You know what they are. You see them on the screen. We can speak up. We know how to do it. You know how to contact your representatives. You can work with groups like Common Cause. You can use fivecalls.org. We've been over these kinds of things before. We can organize town halls. We can organize community forums. We can form grassroots networks. And we will look at what's happening in Minneapolis and how that community has come together strongly and taken to the streets in tens of thousands. We need to be doing that all across this nation, not just in Minneapolis. And we need to support the institutions that protect our democracy. We need to support the ACLU. We need to support the Electronic Frontier Foundation. You're all going to get copies of this presentation. You'll have these links. You can click on them. You need to support First Amendment organizations. We need to support local journalism. You need to contact your local paper, write letters to the editor, make it clear what you think about what's happening. And you need to be, of course, you need to engage. You need to vote. You need to volunteer to help campaigns for candidates that you support, candidates that will counter what Trump is doing. You need to donate to pro-democracy organizations, and you need to participate. Participate as you are today. You need to encourage all your friends and family to participate as you are today through Indivisible, through the League of Voters, through any civic action group. We can make a difference here because resistance does work, and Greenland showed that. Greenland showed that when he threatened all this stuff, the market crashed, one day sell off, and he responded to that. That was one of the reasons he backed off. There was tremendous diplomatic pressure. European leaders at Davos explicitly rejected all of his coercion, and he reversed course. He withdrew his tariff threats. He backed off his military language. Because when markets, when allies, when we as citizens push back together, even this president can respond. So, look, the stakes are very real here. This isn't hyperbole. Democracies have been lost before. Democracies are fragile. The systems that support them require our active defense. And the question is not whether we can succeed. We know we can. It's whether we will try. If we try hard enough, we will succeed. And I need you to help get everybody in this country to defend this democracy because we have a choice. This year is consequential, and your actions matter. So take some action. I'm ready for questions. Sometimes I think I get too passionate with these books. I hope you don't think so.
Yeah. Debbie, do you have some questions for Ed? I've seen them pop up in the chat.
Give me one moment. I'm working on getting the last one that I saw, so I'm getting there. And I
There's
know.
more than one?
Oh, well, yeah, I think so. I think I can count past one.
Yeah. And
Anyway.
as Debbie is doing that, Ed, thank you so much for that presentation. And for those of you who are new on this, you'll shortly discover that when Ed answers the questions that are being asked, and there's quite an array of them, you will gain an even broader understanding of what is going on. And Ed answers the ones he can, and he says, I will get back to you on the ones that he can't, and he does. And we will send out the video that is going to be of the presentation and the questions during the next couple of days. And remember that video is live now on the NWSOFA, that stands for Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action, NWSOFA.org website under YouTube channel. That's the tab on the top. Just follow that, and it's the live program. Go ahead, Debbie. Did I give you enough time?
Oh, you did.
Okay.
Hopefully hopefully that last question, there isn't another one, but there may be, so I cannot guarantee.
Before you proceed,
Yes,
let me say one more thing. Bill mentioned we'll send out a bunch of stuff. We're going to send the slides because the slides have links to the stories that I researched, links to organizations that you should support. And if there are questions I can't answer here, I will research them and we'll send out answers to those things as well. So you're going to get what you need to help you be active, help you take this case to others, and to look deeper yourself if you want to. So that's part of why we do this. Okay, go ahead, Debbie.
okay, thank you, Ed. Bruce has a question for you. So many of Trump's actions, both internationally and domestically, which weakens our security, benefit Russia and not our country. Do you believe Trump is a Russian asset? And if so, what is the basis and what does Putin have on him?
I don't think that, first of all, I have no way of knowing, but my gut tells me that he's not doing this because Putin has something on him. My gut tells me he's doing this because he admires Putin, because he thinks Putin is a strong man who can get his way in the world. And Trump wants to be a strong man who can get his way in the world. And that's why he wants to retreat to the Western Hemisphere and say, I will run the Western Hemisphere. I will run Venezuela. I will run these countries here. I will exploit the mineral resources of my hemisphere the way that Putin is trying to exploit Ukraine and the way that China is trying to exploit and control Southeast Asia. I don't think that he's a Russian asset. I think he's a wannabe strongman.
Okay, Michael's question. Do you think Trump might form alliances with illiberal leaders like Putin, Orban, Erdogan, Modi, etc., to form an autocratic bloc?
Well, to some extent, he is doing that. His board of peace extends invites to all of these people, and some of them have accepted his invite. So his board of peace could be seen as exactly that. I really doubt the board of peace is going to be effective in any way because none of the modern Western nations are signing on to it, and I think that before he can actually make much out of it, we're going to have a Congress that starts to stand up to him, and and he's either going to die or he's going to be out of office. I mean, it takes a long time to build an axis of evil, and I don't think that I don't. I'm not too much worried about his board of peace. I think his board of peace is just going to fall apart and be nothing and not be effective.
Okay, Chris is asking, do you think Marco Rubio is behind his push with these other countries to try to control their trade? I do suspect that Rubio is behind the takeover of Venezuela oil.
Well, yeah, Rubio is a hawk on our neighbors to the south, Cuba, Venezuela. Um, certainly, a Rubio is strongly behind a lot of that. Um, but I don't think that Rubio's behind a lot of other things we talked about today. I don't think the Rubio is interested in seeing NATO torn apart. I don't think Rubio is interested in seeing us take over Greenland and bash our allies. You know, Rubio's job is to maintain our alliances. So he's in a really tough spot here, trying to maintain our alliances when his boss is beating up all our allies. But it's in terms of this hemisphere, yeah, I agree that Rubio is probably the driving force behind what's going on with Venezuela and with Cuba.
Okay. And Chuck is asking, what happened to the oil that was taken?
Well, they sold a bunch of oil and they got a bunch of money and they put it in a bank account. I think it's in Kuwait,
Qatar.
um, Qatar, someplace not on U.S. soil. And I'll tell you why it's not on U.S. soil. There are oil companies that used to work with Venezuela, and they got kicked out of Venezuela when the socialist government took over and nationalized their oil interests. And the oil companies sued Venezuela and the oil companies have judgments against Venezuela for billions of dollars. And if Trump brings that money onshore into our banks, those oil companies can lay claim against it and maybe get their hands on it instead of Trump controlling it. And in fact, one of the recent executive orders he signed indicated that he would like to ensure that oil companies cannot bring suit in our nation to get their hands on the Venezuelan oil that he wants to control. So he sold a bunch of oil. He's going to sell more. He's trying to control the money himself. And right now, he's keeping it in offshore accounts, and that's the story on that.
Okay.
Finally, one other thing. He says that this money, he says out loud, this money will be a benefit to the people of Venezuela and it will be a benefit to us. So he's saying that I want this oil money to help the people of Venezuela, but he intends to keep some of it for us too. So he is interested in stealing some of their resources. And he has said clearly that he wants to control the Western Hemisphere so that the material wealth of the Western Hemisphere can be an advantage to us, to our nation. It's colonialism. It's just outright colonialism. And he has also said basically what he's trying to do is figure out how he can get a government in place in Venezuela that will use this money for the benefit of the population. And well, it's pretty clear that leaving the old government in place, which the old government is mostly in place, he kidnapped Maduro, but all of Maduro's henchmen and his vice president are still running the country. And it's pretty clear that those people are not going to use that money for the benefit of the population. And yet the popular choice that the people voted for, who was not allowed to become president, if that person came to power, then they would use the money for the benefit of the people, probably. But Trump won't support that because he doesn't think he can control that government. He'd rather stick with the autocrats. So it's a totally screwed up situation that we created. Next.
Okay. Bruce would like to know, do you know the status of the complaint filed with the ICC against Trump's action on Venezuela and the boats?
No, but that's a question I will research. Let me take a note on it.
Okay.
In a second.
No
Let's
problem.
see. I will look into this, but my expectation is that um, the Trump administration will not recognize the authority of the International Criminal Court, so that any decision by the ICC would just be ignored by Trump. Okay, next question.
Constance is asking, how will Trump's Board of Peace upend our relationship with Europe and NATO?
Well, I mentioned this already. I don't think the Board of Peace is going to do anything. Nobody's joining that wants peace. And the people who are joining don't want peace. Trump is just he's just what's the right word? He's fascinated with the idea that he could win the Nobel Peace Prize, that he could be a peacemaker, that he could stop endless wars, which is all just a weird dream in his mind. He's starting wars. He's not ending them. He's certainly not ending the war in Ukraine. He's certainly not ending the struggles in the Mideast. He's threatening to attack Iran right now. He did attack Venezuela. So this idea that he can find some way to win the Nobel Peace Prize is just a total lunacy. He's a lunatic in this respect. And he put together a board of peace where he'll invite people, but then he'll rescind the invitation. He doesn't like them. You got to pay him $1 billion to get a permanent seat. You have no control. Trump's in charge of everything. Trump can decide what the Board of Peace will do. Board of Peace can't decide to do anything without Trump's permission. It's nonsense. It's not going to do anything. Um, you can say it undermines NATO. You can say it undermines the UN, but I don't buy it. I think it's just total bullshit.
Hence, the Board of Peace appears to be anything but.
Yep.
Chris's question is, are there any tactics other than bribery or distraction that will get Trump or his advisors, despite compromises required to stay near power, to be more sensitive to needs of our nation's people outside the MAGA bubble?
Wow. Um, okay, what we have seen, what we have seen is that he does respond uh, to certain things. He responds to the market. If the market crashes, he doesn't like it. Um, he responds to what Wall Street wants. Um, he doesn't seem to care what Congress thinks or what voters think. So you're right. It's a tough situation. It's a tough situation to get him to care what we think. I frankly think it's got to come through Congress or the courts. Um, he has. There's been a lot of court judgments against him. However, when things get up to the Supreme Court, oftentimes they don't support the lower courts. But those are all temporary decisions. Those aren't permanent decisions. Those are just for the moment. We're going to let him do what he's doing while we decide what's right, and what's wrong. And these court cases, Supreme Court, they usually come to the head in the summer before the court adjourns for the summer. So we'll see what uh, what the courts will allow him to do and won't allow him to do. It's possible that the Supreme Court will see the things we talked about here today, and will see that they have to be part of reining him in. I it's as Yogi Berra says, making predictions is hard, especially about the future. But we'll have to see what the Supreme Court and where the Supreme Court ends up. Furthermore, we'll have to see where Congress ends up. Um, More and more um, senators are deciding not to run again. And when somebody decides not to run again, they they can grow a spine and they can decide that they should do what's right for the country instead of what will get them reelected next time. Um, there was a just now there was a vote in Congress on the budget, and the Democratic senators said they would not they would not vote for the DHS part of the budget. So, as part of that negotiation, Senator Sanders added an amendment, proposed an amendment that would roll back the 75 billion additional funding for Border Patrol and ICE that was in the big beautiful bill last summer. Two, all the Democratic senators voted for it. Two Republican senators voted to roll back the ICE funding. It wasn't enough to pass the amendment, but at least there was two Republican senators that were willing to stand up to Trump. If we get two more, if we get two more, then the Senate will actually stand up against Trump. So political pressure on the Senate is critical here. Similar political pressure on the House is critical here. Um, I hear people say we'll have to riot, we'll have to rebel, we'll have to take over we'll have to use force. Well, maybe we should get state militias, state um, National Guards to act against ICE. None of that. None of that. We can't do any of that stuff. That's how you end up in a civil war. We fight this through the courts. We fight this through our politics, and we're seeing the possibility that will work, and that's where we have to put our efforts. Next.
Okay. Chris is asking, how is it possible for Trump to create a financial account in Qatar to keep money from Venezuela's oil sales?
How is it possible? Call them up, open an account, send the
Yeah.
money there. Only Congress can stop this. The administration can do whatever the heck it wants, as long as Congress is just willing to stand back and say, we don't care, go ahead. And that's what the GOP leadership in Congress is doing.
Yes.
You know, I talk to people about upcoming elections, and a lot of people are worried that he's going to find a way to stop that. Well, there's things he can do and there's things he can't do. I mean, everybody says, well, nobody thought he could open an account, an offshore account, and put money there under his own control. Well, clearly he can do that. He did it. There's a lot of stuff we think he shouldn't do. We didn't think he'd be able to do that he's doing. But there are some things he just simply can't do. I mean, he can't stop the next election from happening without invoking the Insurrection Act and declaring martial law and sending the military out to stop all the polling places. So we have to understand the difference between what he can and can't do, uh, and and how we can stop him from doing what he can do and that he shouldn't do. And that's all through political and through the courts.
Yes, and Qatar allowed this also. So Paul is
Well,
asking, yeah. How can we possibly hope to secure democracy without enacting pro-democracy laws and practices?
well, um, first of all, we have pro-democracy laws, and we have had pro-democracy practices. We have an administration that's ignoring the pro-democracy laws and refusing to undertake the pro-democracy actions. And the way this country is structured, um, there are supposed to be checks and balances that stop the administration from doing that. And the political will to undertake those checks and balances hasn't been there, which is why Congress hasn't um, undertaken its duty to oversee what the administration is doing. And the courts at the highest level have been reluctant to rein back the administration. I think that in many cases the Supreme Court feels that what's happening here is a political issue, not a judicial issue, and that they want to see the politics solve this without them having to solve it. And I think it is true that that the way to support our democracy is to wake Congress up and to get Congress to undertake their role to defending our democracy. And we do that by the steps that we all take to defend our democracy in terms of supporting organizations. I've listed organizations you can support, that you can take part in. Um, we all know that we're here to learn so that we can teach, so that I've taught you some things today, and I want you to go out and teach others, teach your family members, teach your members of your church, teach your neighbors. That's how we build the political will to force Congress to act to restore our democracy, and that's what I'm here for doing, restoring our democracy. Next question.
All right. Chris's inquiry. Didn't the Supreme Court just declare that these tariffs are not legal? So how is Trump still playing a tariff war with Europe, Canada, China, and South America?
Well, I know there's a case in front of the Supreme Court right now challenging the tariffs, and I haven't heard a decision from them. If a decision came down this morning and I didn't see it, great. But no, I haven't heard the Supreme Court say that the tariffs are illegal. And if I'm wrong on that, and if there's a decision that I haven't heard about yet, somebody tell me.
Okay, Constance is asking, with Trump's move on Georgia, many believe he's on his way to rigging the election. What's your view?
Yeah, I've talked about this a whole lot with people on social media. I talk about this people right now. Right now, we're gearing up to run our primary election, and I'm deeply involved in how we run our elections here in Cook County. So this has been a topic of conversation for me. Um, I think that it would be impossible for Trump to stop the election from happening. Um, the only way I see possible to stop the election from happening is to invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy the military throughout the country to stop to seize voting machines and stop the vote to physically stop the election from happening. He has no legal authority to do it any other way. Um, the courts won't support uh, any kind of emergency declaration to delay the election. There have been delays in elections in the past, but it's only because um, there have been true national emergencies like a hurricane that you can put off your election for a couple of days if there's a hurricane right now. But we've never put off an election more than a couple of days for a hurricane. Even during the Civil War, we ran elections as required by law. And states run elections. States are going to run an election. Illinois is going to run an election. There's nothing Trump can do short of deploying the military and physically stopping us from doing it. There's nothing he can do to stop it. Now, he can put ICE agents outside the polling place to intimidate people from showing up, which is why we're encouraging people to take mail ballots and have a white male friend take your mail ballot to an early voting site and do deposit in a drop box. We have seen communities come together to support elections. In New York, when they had an election recently, the community members came together to find ways to make sure that people of color could get to the polling place without it could being confronted by ICE. And in fact, ICE did not try and interfere with the New York primary election. I think that the threats to our elections are no different than they ever were. There's gerrymandering, there's voter suppression, and all those things have been there all along, and they're still there. But I don't see the possibility for it to get much worse than that.
Okay. Linda's inquiry. What is the definition of a domestic terrorist in 2026?
Well, I mean, the definition is clear. It's got to be somebody who wants to use the tactics of terrorism to influence our government. They want to burn down buildings. They want to attack people with an AR-15. They want to sow terror. Renee Good wasn't out sowing terror. Neither was the nurse who was killed. Calling what Trump is doing is he's saying that anybody who opposes his domestic agenda is a domestic terrorist. That's their attitude, and it's nonsense. It's total nonsense. It's insulting to say I'm killing this nurse because he's lawfully carrying a weapon. He has a permit to carry a weapon, and that means I can shoot him because I feel that he's a danger to me. Makes him a domestic terrorist. Nonsense. It's insulting, and it's taking things so far that even people on the right are seeing that this has gone too far. 30% of Republicans now see that this has all gone too far. 90% of Democrats, 75% of independents see that all this has gone too far. Trying to say these people are domestic terrorists and are shooting them as justified. We all see the videos. We all know that's bullshit. And their claims are just damaging their credibility to the point where we won't believe anything they say anymore. I don't even believe that the FBI is going to run an investigation. So no, obviously they're not domestic terrorists.
Okay. Robin's inquiry. If we all get united and ask for a special election to oust him from the Oval Office, is it doable? He has broken all the norms, not following any law.
No. Our
Not
Constitution
doable.
doesn't support that. No, that's not how things work around here. You can't just decide to have an election that's not something that has already been enabled by our laws. We have laws that call for federal elections every 2 years, and those elections put people in power. And you can't just call a snap election and get rid of them the way you can in other forms of government. That's not our form of government. In our form of government, the way to get rid of Trump is to have Congress impeach and remove him. There's no other way. There's one other way. Trump's cabinet can declare him incompetent and kick him out of office. But Trump's cabinet's not going to do that because Trump has put people in his cabinet who would never do that. No, the only way to get him out of office is to impeach and remove him through Congress. And that's a very heavy lift because uh, there aren't enough GOP senators who are willing to do that. And even if we get control of the Senate, there won't be enough GOP senators willing to do that. So I have, I think we're stuck with him for 4 years. I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of him, but I think we can box him in. I think we can get Congress to stop him from doing the kind of bad stuff he's doing. I think we can get the courts to stop him, and I think that when the dust settles from this 4 year period, it's going to be pretty damn easy for the Democrats to get control of this government and try and set things on a right course. In fact, it might be pretty easy. It might be possible to pass some constitutional amendments because, constitutional amendments are hard to pass. But once you've had a crisis and once you've seen that your Constitution needs reinforcement, they get easier. So, after the Civil War, we passed 4 or 5 amendments to try and make sure that the things that led to the Civil War would never happen again. So I think we're stuck with them for 4 years, but I think that we have a lot of opportunity to do some good stuff in the aftermath of this, a lot. And I'm really looking forward to getting rid of the Electoral College, for example, after this, for example.
Okay, Michael's question. How can people coordinate around the country to share the ways they are going to protect the vote in November?
Okay, so I recommend you come to the coffee and conversations in the morning and share your ideas and your concerns there. We Bill and a couple of other volunteers, Debbie, you're one of them, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And Jim McGrath, my partner in Restoring Democracy, they run a national forum every weekday morning at 9 o'clock, where people from around the nation come together to talk about what their concerns are and what they can do about them. Bill, how many people come now? Is it we have 30,000 people across the nation show up every morning? Is that it?
We have 24,000 that have registered for this since January 1st of last year, but we typically get about 110 that drop in from starting with the East Coast all the way through the West Coast over our hour.
And
I wish the
that,
30,000 would show up, but I don't have the bandwidth.
no, seriously. Groups like Indivisible, you saw, maybe you weren't here at the start, but groups like Indivisible are popping up all over the nation. Um, uh, two new chapters a day around here. I see chapters overlapping one another. People coming together in town hall meetings to find ways to work together. I think Indivisible is a major force here. I think what Bill is doing is exemplary along those lines, and I'm sure that many other chapters are doing the same stuff. So really encourage people to get involved with Indivisible. Encourage them to come to our morning coffee stuff. Bill sends notes out all the time about how to do that. I'm sure you can find it. We can send it out along with what we're sending out today if necessary. But we can come together. We certainly can, um, and we need to. So as I said, find groups, find the groups around your neighborhood, find the groups around your community where you can come together, bring them together to a more national conversation. Listen to what the leaders of Indivisible have to say every week in their community calls. We're going to have another demonstration on March 28th, another No Kings demonstration. We want, every time we do this, we get more people in the street. We need to, and you'll see in Minneapolis, you see tens of thousands of people in the streets. On March 28th, I want to see tens of thousands of people in the streets of every city in our nation. That's how we send the message to Congress that you can't ignore us.
Okay, we will go to the next question from Patricia. Can we sue the Senate and House if every American sues because they work for us?
No. You can't use the courts against Congress. I don't think so. I think that you have to do this through political action, not through judicial action. I mean, you expect the courts to uphold our laws. But when Congress refuses to undertake their role in our checks and balances, I don't think Congress is breaking a law. I don't think you can sue them and saying you're violating some law by not doing this, but you're certainly not upholding your commitment to your constituents. That's a political issue, not a legal issue. So I don't think we can sue Congress, but we can hold them to account politically. We can say to these guys, look, you take care of this stuff, or you're going to be out of office, and we're going to find somebody who will take care of this stuff. That's how you address Congress. You can't sue Congress.
Okay. We have an S.A. Linden that is asking, how can democratically led states coordinate to fight this monstrous takeover? The Dem AGs have already been successful in one attempt.
Well, I think that they do coordinate. I think that the governors of the blue states do talk to one another. Um, we take actions that we think are models for other states, and we find other states taking similar actions. The kinds of sanctuary policies that one state implements get copied by another state. The kinds of lawsuits that we can file against the administration. You can sue the administration for violating laws. You can't sue the Congress for not doing their political duty, but you can sue the administration. And blue states do come together. I think they're already doing a lot of it. Certainly, when you are bringing, once again, it boils down to political pressure. We can have political pressure on our federal Congress to stop Trump. We could have political pressure on our state governors and our state legislators to work together better to minimize the damage that Trump is occurring. So most of these things are of political nature, and it's easier to act at the state and local level than it is to act at the federal level. I mean, here in Illinois, you can drive down to Springfield in a couple hours, knock on a bunch of doors. Maybe you have made appointments to speak to some legislators, and you go down and you tell them what you think, and you get back in your car and drive home. You can do that in one day. You can get involved with people like the League of Women Voters or Safe USA, Safe Illinois that put together lobby days where they'll get a few buses. I mean, the Safe Illinois group, which I'm part of, which I work with, it works on gun violence prevention. They put together a lobby day where they'll send buses to 6 or 7 different locations around Chicago, and they'll get 100 people or 200 people, take them down to Springfield, and have them hound their legislators on the issue they want to see pursued. You could be easily effective in dealing with state legislators to get the states to do what you think they should be doing. And if what you think they should be doing is to coordinate better with other blue states in addressing what's going on here, then take political action to tell your legislators that you should do that, and tell your governor you want to do that. That's if the question was, how do we get states to work together better? That's the answer. Use your political power with your legislature to tell them you want them to do that.
Okay, due to what's going on culturally, this is coming from Constance. I'm kind of summarizing a little bit before the question. Culturally, and due to what's going on in Minneapolis, as well as decreasing popularity, Trump is being seen as a cruel and deranged man. Plus, we've got Springsteen. Do you see Trump losing the culture, and do you see that as a big edge for us? And is it happening quickly enough?
Well, the damage that ICE is doing, he's quickly losing on that front. I mean, people care about some things. They care about the economy, and he's not meeting their demands in that area. people care about border security and immigration, and that used to be a strong point in his favor, and it's not anymore. He's losing that front as well. And actually, it's happening because white people are seeing that he's willing to kill white people. To so a lot of white people would say, I don't care much about this because it's not happening to white people, and I'm a white guy and I don't care. But now he's seeing, oh shit, I could be the next guy killed if I happen to drive into the wrong spot the wrong way. And gun owners are saying, are now he's telling me that my carrying a weapon makes it more likely that I'm going to be killed by federal forces. Really? So he's losing popular support in those areas, and you can call that cultural all you want, but it's not just cultural; it's political. And certainly people like Springsteen, who shine a light on this stuff, help build the political will through their cultural work. I mean, Stephen Colbert has been doing cultural work in this area for a long time. It's got a show canceled for it, but yeah, he's losing the cultural war. But most importantly, he's losing the political war that comes from that. And there's going to be you like to think there's going to be a bloodbath in the federal election in November. But you got to remember that due to gerrymandering and self-sorting, 85% of the seats in the House are pretty much locked in to one part or the other. There's only really 15% of the seats that could sway one way or another. So in the past, you might have seen a 40 seat sway in the House in a situation like this. But gerrymandering and self-sorting have gotten so far, and so many House seats are safe that if you see a 15 seat sway, that'll be a lot. That'll be equivalent to a 40 seat sway 20 years ago. And we're going to see a 15 seat sway in the November election. We're going to take the House. We might, if we keep all of our fingers and toes crossed and wish upon a star, we might see the Senate flip too. But that's kind of unlikely. But just getting the House will be enough. Getting the House will mean that we can run congressional hearings and we can ensure that the truth comes to light about what's going on when the DOJ won't really investigate. And we can make sure that no bills pass Congress that support anything Trump wants. There won't be any big, beautiful bills once we get control of the House. And getting control of the Senate wouldn't matter all that much. I mean, it would matter in terms of judicial appointments. But even if we get control of the Senate, we're not going to have the kind of supermajority that could overcome a presidential veto, much less convict on impeachment. So getting control of the House is going to happen, and that's because of the cultural and political mood of the country is swinging strongly against Trump. Next.
Hey, Julia is asking what can be done at a state level to hold members of this administration and DHS employees accountable.
Okay, so I just talked about how you can influence your state legislature to do stuff. Many states have passed laws which say clearly, explicitly, that the state can take enforcement action against federal agents that violate the civil rights or breaks state laws. So we need more states to enact laws like that. I believe Illinois has those laws in place, and we need to push state government officials to implement those laws, to bring charges against federal officials who have violated the state's laws and the civil rights of the state's residents. So how do we make that happen? Like I said, you use your voice with your legislature and with your governor, and you make it clear to them that you want to see blue states undertake these actions. No, nobody's going to do it but you. Nobody's going to move our state government to do what's right but you and me and all 100. We still have 108 people on this call. Those are the people that make these things happen. We had 170 a few minutes ago. Thank you for hanging in here. The 108 who are still here. Next question.
Okay. Paul is asking, why not have the Attorney General nationally elected perhaps for 4-year terms, with their election coinciding with midterm elections.
Well, generally, that's not how the founders envisioned our government to work. They envisioned, first of all, they envisioned that um, Congress represents the people, and that the House of Representatives represent the people, and that the Senate represents the states, and that the administration is simply tasked to do what Congress tells them to do. So a president is tasked with running an administration, and he's tasked with filling the seats of the administration, all the cabinet members, including the attorney general. So that's the structure that the founders put in place under our Constitution. You want to change the Constitution so that we micromanage the administration, the population micromanages the administration. I don't think that's a good idea. The Congress is supposed to micromanage the administration, not us directly. We elect representatives; they're supposed to do that for us. I have seen cases where when you okay, let me say this. I think direct democracy, where the population in general votes on a lot of stuff, I don't think it works very well. It works fine in a small New England town. It works fine when we all know one another and we can get in a room and debate and decide and vote. That's the kind of a direct democracy that works. But for a nation of our size, that's not going to work. For a nation of our size, you have to use an indirect democracy where we elect representatives, and the representatives go forth and look after our interests for us. Look at what happened with Brexit. In England, they decided to let the population as a whole decide a major issue about whether they'd be in the EU or not. And people with a lot of money manipulated public opinion to the point where the public did something stupid. The public decided to leave the EU, which damaged their own interests and helped the interests of a few rich people who used their money to influence their population to make a stupid choice. We don't want that kind of stuff happening here. We don't want people like Elon Musk, who have tons of money to run campaigns, to choose who should be to influence popular votes to choose who should be our attorney general. I think that would be a mistake. Direct democracy does not work in a large country like this. And direct democracy is how this country is supposed to work. We're supposed to vote for legislators. Legislators are supposed to make sure the right things happen in our country, and that's what we have to make work.
Okay. Lorraine is asking, can Democrats sue Trump with a class action lawsuit because he is against all Democrats in Democratic states?
Look, you don't sue somebody because they're against you. You sue somebody because they break a law. Now, if it's clear that Trump's breaking a lot of laws, but I'm not so sure that the courts would decide that we all have standing to sue the president for what he's doing. Once again, I do not feel that we can direct our action through the courts. I feel we have to direct our action through the political process. The courts will address actual breaking of the law. And here, the right thing to do is what you see happening, that the state's attorney generals are coming together, representing their population, filing suits against the federal government. That's more effective than the idea that we could form a class action suit. I don't think that the courts would find we have standing. I think that we're doing the best we can through the judicial process by the attorney generals of the blue states coming together and filing actions. The courts are really slow. really slow, especially when you get to the Supreme Court. It's like it takes a year for them to decide anything. So political action is more timely. Political action is why Trump decides to back down. He backed down um, from Greenland, not because of courts, but because of markets, because of diplomacy, because of political concerns. So I don't think that we should try and pursue this through a class action suit. I think we should try and pursue this through political action.
Susan is asking, is it true that the July 2025 one big beautiful bill took 75 billion from Medicaid funding and increased funding to ICE by 75 billion? How do we get the money restored to Medicaid?
Okay, so it's not quite the way you said it. Yeah, 75 billion was added to ICE, and some money was taken away from Medicaid, some money was taken away from Obamacare, some money was taken away from here, there, and everywhere. Um, and uh, a lot of tax breaks were given to wealthy people. Um, it's not just 75 was taken from here and put there. But yeah, 75 was put on ICE, which, as you just heard me say, um, Democrats and two Republicans voted to undo in the Senate. It wasn't sufficient. But frankly, you see okay, where we are right now with Homeland Security is we funded, once the House gets back next week and passes the same bill the Senate passed, then the government will be open, except DHS is only open for 2 weeks. We only gave them 2 weeks worth of funding. So over the next 2 weeks, we have to make a compromise with the Senate Republicans as to what it will take to fund DHS. Now, Schumer has suggested we have to require them not to wear masks. We have to require them to uh, wear body cameras. I don't think that's sufficient. I think we have to require them to stop invading our cities and pay attention to our land borders instead of what's happening in our cities. I think we have to make them cooperate with state agencies that want to investigate shootings or other deprivation of civil rights. Frankly, I think we should make them roll back that $75 billion. I don't know that the Senate will agree to that, but that's, if you want to roll back that $75 billion, the way to do it is to get enough senators to insist that it be done before we pass DHS budget for this year. Next question. Oh, I'd like to wrap this up in 10 minutes. It's been an hour and 50 minutes. I appreciate all of your coming, but I do have another life to live too. So I'm going to give this another 10 minutes. Now, Debbie, you're muted.
Okay, one more question, or do you want to wrap up now?
No, I'll go to 4. Let's take one more question.
Okay. Beulah is asking, do the executive orders go away after a president leaves office?
No, but the next president can get rid of them.
Right.
So
Okay.
is that the last question you have? If there's any last minute thoughts that anybody has, I'll give it another 10 minutes here. If there's anybody that's just thought of something they want to talk about, go ahead and raise a hand. You know how to raise a hand. There's a button down there, and we can take a couple of more questions through hand raising.
Okay, because I have
Anybody
tons
has
more
them.
questions, I'm sure.
Oh, you have tons more questions?
I have
Well,
more
Debbie,
questions and questions that I haven't even copied yet.
well, okay, let's stick with Debbie then. Debbie, just give me 10 more minutes worth of questions and forget about the
Okay,
hand raising.
just yell at me and say stop.
I will.
Okay, Claudette is asking, can you recommend any reputable fact-checking sites?
Well, PolitiFact is quite reputable. Let me take that one offline, and I'll answer that. I'm
Okay.
not really prepared, but recommend fact checking sites. Okay, I'll respond to that when we send stuff out.
Okay, Boot Money, good old Boot Money, is asking, why is it so easy to continuously fool the people of the United States?
Well, um, I don't know that it's so much fooling. It's what they do is they focus on hot button issues. Like they'll say, um, I'm going to make sure that we stop doing abortions. And there's a lot of people in the country that care about that. And they just focus on that one issue. And they get a whole bunch of people to vote for them because of that one issue. When in fact, there's all kinds of stuff that they're going to do that'll hurt those same voters. But they get them to vote for them because of a hot button issue like that. Um, and, that's just some of that's inevitable. Um, why did Trump win? Well, he won because a lot of people were very unhappy about inflation. And there's a lot of people who voted blue all the time that voted red that one time because of inflation. We could have run anybody. We still would have lost. It wasn't because Harris stepped over Biden. We could have run anybody in that election. We would have lost because people were so upset about inflation. Um, but the point is that if we get our government to work properly, it won't matter because even though Trump got elected because of inflation and he's doing all kinds of bad stuff because our Congress doesn't work. If our Congress worked, it wouldn't matter that we elected Trump as much as it does now. If our Congress worked, Trump couldn't do all the stuff he's doing. The problem here is not that he's able to fool voters. The problem here is our government is dysfunctional. Our Congress doesn't work, and we got to fix that. And we got to make some changes in how we elect people, how we nominate people. We can't have partisan primaries where a few radical members of either the Democrats or the Republicans choose extreme legislators who can't possibly compromise, and we end up with a Congress that's more polarized than the population in general is. A Congress that can't compromise for the good of the nation. We have to fix those things, and when we fix those things, it won't matter so much that we can fool one side or the other into voting for us on a hot button issue because all the other issues will be a concern of Congress and Congress will act on them. The Congress is not just one guy who thinks he can do whatever the heck he wants. We get our government to work again and things will be better, even if some of our people can be fooled into voting against their best interests in the terms of the presidential election. The president should have nowhere near as much power as he has now.
Okay, Ori's question. Without a federal Voting Rights Act, who can prevent southern states and others from legally limiting voting, i.e. the disabled, POC, etc.?
Well, there still are some laws on the books in this area. And there's still the possibility of enforcing some of them. But the other issue is that some of these southern states are getting to the point where they're not as ready as you think they are. I mean, you look at Texas. There's a lot of people who are leaving California and moving to Texas for economic reasons. Look at Georgia. There's tons of people where their families moved from the South to the North that are now moving back to the South. And these states that, I mean, it's Georgia and Texas are going to be pretty purple as things go on over the next 10 or 20 years because of the way our populations are moving. So those states will find their own people requiring them not to um, violate civil rights along these lines. But yeah, I mean, the federal enforcement is necessary. Once again, this is just another example of where Congress is falling down on the job. And so my hope is that we can rebuild our democracy and our Congress so that our Congress works. But I also hope that as our demographics, as people move around, that some of these really red states will become more purple. Now that's happening in Georgia for sure. It's going to take a long time to happen in Texas, but it's going to happen in Texas as well.
Okay, would you like one more question?
I could take two or three.
Okay. S.A. Linden is asking, Trump and company do have the ability to delay the outcomes of the election and refuse to seat the victors. They can stall based on a lot of things. Any suggestions?
Well, we have seen the House stall on seating a representative, but not for long. They sat that representative. Um, they can. Well, it depends on the kind of election we're talking about. Okay. In terms of the presidency, they can't stall that election. They can't stall um, the results of that election. If Trump loses, if excuse me, in 2028, if Vance loses, um, going beyond Jan 20, there's no way that they can delay the result of the election. The Democrat, the current president will no longer be the president as of uh, January 20th, 2028. And if if they succeed in stopping the the swearing in of the new president, then it just goes to the secession. That the vice president, then the Speaker of the House. I mean, those all become the acting president in that case. So they can't really delay the effects of a presidential election. Now they can the the House the House leadership or the Senate leadership might be able to delay the effect of a legislative election, but not for long. They wouldn't get away with it, especially if it's quite likely that the House leadership will be in Democratic hands in 2027. So the Democrats are not going to slow down the results of an election, even if it means that their margins get narrowed a little bit. They're not going to stop a Republicans representative from being seated. Um, so those are the ways that the results of an election can be delayed. And I don't think that's a very serious concern. And I think that it's now 4 o'clock, and I'm going to want to end now. Thank you all for coming. Please do take action on your own part. Talk to your friends, your neighbors, your family members, your church members. Help them understand that we have to act here. We have to defend this democracy, and nobody's going to do it but you and me. So I'm going to do it. And I want all of you to help me. Thank you. Have a good day.
Hey.
And please
Hey,
all
Bill.
remember, that this has been recorded on the NWSOFA, Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action, NWSOFA.org website. When you open it up, on the top tab, you'll see YouTube channel. Click that. Follow that through with one click, and that'll take you to all of our videos. There's a couple hundred there. So what you want to do then is click the area called Live, and you'll see the last 2 weeks of videos. There's about 10 there. This is the current one. What is in my backdrop right now will be will be what you're looking for. And I think we've already had 10 views, so it's going to be quite popular. Share this with anybody locally. Share it on your websites. Share it on your Facebook pages. This is important. And I think Ed just did an excellent job. And I want to thank Debbie so much for trying to gather in all those questions, organize them,
I will
and
tell you,
present
there are
them.
more, Bill. There are tons more.
Okay, and now I think Ed normally asks you to send all questions to him so that he
Well,
can kind of
let
see
me
what they
just
are.
let me just capture the chat right now. Let me see if I remember how to do that.
I'm saving it for you, Ed, if you'd like me to send it to you.
Yeah, send me the chat so I can
Okay.
see these further questions. Maybe I'll take some time to look through some of those questions and respond to them in what we send out after the meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
Will
thanks,
do.
folks.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
all.
much, Ed.